My name is Arlene Deptuk. I'm the Indigenous Education Coordinator with the Nanaimo Art Gallery.
Hi, I'm Julie Bevan. I'm the Executive Director at Nanaimo Art Gallery. So in early 2016, we were doing lots of thinking here and talking here about our relevance to the community, how we were connecting in meaningful ways to the communities that we thought we were serving, and after kind of attending some meetings and hearing from artists across the country about the relationship of art museums to Indigenous artists, after reading the 94 calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and thinking about the legacy of residential school, we decided to put in a proposal to BC Arts Council to establish a job position here for Indigenous Education Coordinator. And so we created a proposal, and we were successful through BC Arts Council and got the funding to establish this position. And we were also thinking about really being relevant and how the diversity of our communities needs to be reflected in all of our community organizations, and looking to thought leaders in the museum community who had been writing about this. And I brought a quote that I'm going to share with you because I think it's really beautiful. I was reading the book Art of Relevance by Nina Simon, and she's based in the States, but she wrote, if you're going to open new doors, especially doors to the heart, you have to start at the front door. You have to show that you're inviting people in on their terms with generosity, humility, and a nod to what speaks to them. Effective front doors have greeters who look like your community, welcoming them at the door, speaking their language, providing entry points that match the keys they use every day. And so that thought was something that really guided our application to BC Arts Council. And when we were successful, we had already connected with Arlene Deptuk, who had joined us in a gallery assistant role. And it was perfect. It was fate to find Arlene, who was so ideally suited for this position, which was really about building bridges with organizations and individuals in our community, and finding ways to enrich the great programs that we were already offering to incorporate new perspectives and take them in new ways to make them more meaningful to our communities.
And for that reason, it's an absolute honor to work with the team here at the Nanaimo Art Gallery, because of those ideas that really line up with so many of the teachings that I have been honored to receive from incredible Indigenous educators out in Surrey School District, Gastelas Wedley, Gloria Cole, Marjorie Dumont. Here in Nanaimo would be Stephanie Stevens, Wendy Beaton, Erin Ashby have been some real, and there's so many more. There's so many Indigenous leaders in education that I've had the honor of working beside, that when I was hearing about what was happening here at the gallery as well too, I was excited and enthusiastic to come and join, because it's really so wonderful having worked in education for 20 years and to hear some of the conversations that are happening in the communities around the term reconciliation. And it was just so exciting to be a part of bringing some of the philosophies from cultural knowledge to an organization that we could then, share with the community. Mm-hmm. And it also serves to, in such a beautiful way, in my opinion, complement the work that's been happening in the schools, for many good work that's been happening in school districts across BC and Canada for many years, since the introduction of the Indigenous education sort of model that was happening. So it was great to be a part of an organization that, I could turn to my past colleagues and go, this is what's happening, and it's really exciting. So, yeah. While being a community organization where welcoming, like that door is open and welcome to everybody in the community,
Awesome.
that it's accessible to everyone. And that's another wonderful thing about being here and sharing some of those teachings so that it's accessible. Those teachings can be accessible to everyone in the community as well too, as we continue to just naturally include them in how we function.
So we have an exhibition program, which is really at the heart of our purpose here in the gallery. Admission to our gallery is by donation or free. And I think that's really key here in this community to welcoming people in and to removing as much as possible barriers to access. And so we've tried several strategies upstairs in the gallery to make it feel like a welcoming and friendly and comfortable place that you can drop in and spend 15 minutes or an hour and then feel free to come back another time. And so those exhibitions are open to everyone. And we also have our Saturday studio program, which runs every week on Saturday morning. Arlene often facilitates that with our art education coordinator and other staff. And that is aimed for children 5 to 12. We have Pro D days, we have spring break art camps, we have teen programs throughout the summer, a contemporary art immersion program for teens, and a code switching, a teen program that runs through the academic year, and it's a group that meets twice a month. And so those are some of our main programs. We have workshops for adults. We have, since Arlene has joined us, you've organized drumming circles and special tours, lots of in-gallery tours for school groups, community groups, anyone who wants to come and have a tour. So those are kind of a summary of our offerings here. Our audience is increasingly reflecting the composition of this place, the people who live in this region. I think more now than ever, we have Indigenous people who come to our activities and our events. Since Arlene has joined us, we've had elders, Nanaimo elders, come to I think each of our opening receptions and public talks to do welcomings. And Ho'okaminam language learners have come. So our audience has really expanded. One thing that I've noticed, also in the way that people engage with us on social media, our audience is becoming more diverse. And I think it's because of the work Arlene is doing, and also all of the work our staff and volunteer team is doing on a lot of different fronts to attract young people, to attract, anyone who's really interested in learning, who's creative and curious, and who's excited to experience something different in downtown Nanaimo.
The young people, anybody that really comes through the door through our art lab programs, the hope is, from the Indigenous education coordinator's perspective, is that looking at how we're sharing and teaching, that it's done in a way that is first and foremost thinking about the local Indigenous nation that are the original stewards here. So sometimes that doesn't necessarily happen in a formal training practice, but I'm a huge language revitalization advocate, and so regularly I'll attend language classes so that I can bring Ho'okaminam to the class, to the whole organization really, but when those young people who come to the art lab, they're able to become comfortable with Ho'okaminam being spoken, and the hope is that the practice of language revitalization here will have a positive role model for other organizations or communities as a whole to implement wherever they are, because the languages are nearing extinction, which is very concerning. But that's a whole nother interview. The reality is that whether you're an art institution, a museum, or a bank, language is something that we can all think about and support. That is one of my main things that just is inherently in me that I'm constantly sharing with my colleagues. But then our other outcome is that the young people will have, new experiences with art, which is true as we move forward with positive change. These are going to be new experiences that we're all going to be engaging in. So it's a good fit for me in that way to be a part of this here. So I'll work with my colleagues so that around the programmings that are coming out of Art Lab, that the young people have these wonderful works or experiences with the gallery, and then the other pieces that include the cultural knowledge as well too. They just slide in there naturally, which is quite cool because we have a really great team. For example, with one of my with both of them, sometimes they'll be talking about what they're working on for Saturday Studio, and something will just come to mind for me, whether it's language or cultural knowledge, and I'll share that, and that doesn't necessarily come out in their practice, but it still can be a part of the spirit and the energy that's happening in the program as it's being executed. And so sometimes it's not a direct me being in the art lab and I'm sharing, but I think the dialogue that happens prior with our team, whether it's in art lab or whether it's in other things that we're doing, those are equally important as to me being there as well too, and sharing the knowledge in a formal setting. The other ones are just as important too, those conversations and that spirit and energy. That's
our vision at the gallery is inspiring and challenging our communities through art. And so that's what we come back to all of the time in our decision making and our planning for programs. And so we can be exploring through the gallery and through our programs all kinds of different big ideas. Upstairs, we've been exploring through our exhibition Landfall and Departure Epilogue, Listening to the Sea. We've been exploring ideas about being attuned to what the ocean is telling us. So really looking at the critical issues of our time through the lens of contemporary art. And so our programs here are intended to foster critical thinking, the ability to recognize and understand different perspectives and different ways of knowing and different ways of creating and sharing knowledge, different technical skills, different practical skills in terms of making things with your hands and what that means. And so that kind of speaks to the educational piece. And I also would say that rather than, we're here in our own organization, learning is a value that we all share. And so we're learning as we go too, and kind of figuring it out through what I would say is quite an organic process at times, and talking through some challenging things where we don't know what the right answer is. And so, oftentimes I feel like we expect a lot on the part of our audiences, but we also expect a lot of ourselves in terms of our ongoing willingness to be open and learning and changing how we do things. And we're a small organization and small team, and so we kind of have the luxury of starting up new things or putting a stop to things that aren't working or need to be changed. So that's a pretty exciting opportunity and makes us a good place to work. Well, we're always inviting feedback. We've just gone through a process, it's still out there, an online survey to invite people to give input on their visitor experience at the gallery. And I think that the gallery has definitely received some criticisms, not so much because of its trajectory necessarily on Indigenous education, but overall because lots of things have changed here. And we are we've made a commitment to showcasing and embracing diversity in, the biggest possible definition of the word. So diversity in terms of the practice of artists that we work with. So we're not only working with artists who are practicing in a traditional kind of medium and who are pushing the boundaries and exploring new ways of making work. And we're also working on redefining what it means to be a public art museum in Nanaimo and what our role is. And so I think we have received some criticism and a little bit of pushback, and people are growing with us and with some of these ideas that we're exploring. And because we're not always operating in the traditional way, certainly that Nanaimo Art Gallery has operated, or that other art galleries operate. So, but I think that's healthy.
Absolutely. I'm always firing out my feedback forms to, because I agree. I always love to get feedback of how I might be able to add or subtract from my work that I do, so that we, can continue to be doing good work here. That's great.
And I think it's part of our responsibility as a public art museum to be doing this kind of work and to be on the forefront of participating in these critical conversations of our time. And so change is hard, and I think we understand that, and but lots of people have come along with us, and lots of people are being involved in ways that they haven't been before. So we know that we're on the right trajectory.
I think that's a tricky one to answer, because I am a language learner, and so I'm still learning about Somaldiach, which is the Tsimshian language of my family, as well as, out of respect, learning the Ho'okaminam, because that's who's the original stewards of this area are. But my understanding in Somaldiach is that there's no straight definition or straight cross translation for education, that there's learning and exchanges, but I could be wrong, because I am a learner. And so when I think about Indigenous education, my hope is that, because we keep coming back to that hope thing, that maybe we don't even have such a narrow definition, and that it will just be new ways of teaching and sharing that are just natural and organic, as opposed to, this is Indigenous education and we need you to include it here, and whatever, that it be embedded in how, be a part of the new Canadian philosophy or new Canadian ways of being. The idea of Indigenous education is important because of our history and where we are right now. I think we still maybe need to have that, be very thoughtful of that. But as we move forward, my hope is that there will be less of a divide between the two things, and that the learnings and teachings will just be, imagine, hey, our grandkids. And it's all just inclusive, and that's a beautiful vision.
That's great.
Well, for me it is anyway.
As a non-Indigenous person, I don't feel like it's my place to be defining Indigenous education, but what I kind of imagine it to be across the landscape is of educational structures is to be a re-looking at all of those frameworks and structures, and seeing how they need to be broken up and remodeled and shifted to include many more diverse perspectives and ways of doing things and ways of knowing. Because the systems that we have in place now, are inherited from colonial structures. And so I think about kind of like the overarching structure and the opportunity to revision that and transform that. And I think that there are examples out there that I followed along with in terms of how that is happening and making a difference. So imagining us in 2028. Well, one thing that I think is a priority is expanding our staff capacity. Arlene's position has been made permanent now because we've been able to attract investment to support that. But it's not full-time, and I think that we need that position to be full-time. And then I think that we need to have other strategies, which we've been working on, to incorporate diversity, which is in our strategic plan, at all levels of our organization in terms of on the board. And so I can see this trajectory that we're on right now in terms of learning together and really developing a holistic, team-based approach to developing programs that contain multiple perspectives, kind of taking that up to another notch. And I think one thing is time and staffing resources and resources to offer more programs, like money. When I say resources in this context, I mean money, yeah.
Well, at the moment, yeah, the challenge is I have many great ideas, and the challenge is finances and being able to support those ideas. So yeah, that's a big challenge, because yes, the 10-year plan is a really great vision. I love the strategic plan that we have for the gallery, and being able to be a part of that is like so wonderful, because it lines up so much with the idea of community and providing a space that's accessible to anybody is such a wonderful opportunity to be a part of, to extend that idea of belonging in a community is just lines up so wonderfully with having a holistic environment in our community. But anyway, the challenge is the financial pieces. That's the number one thing.
Mm-hmm. I think that communicating what we do here and all of the amazing things that are happening and all of the amazing connections and stories that are coming out of this place, that needs to be a priority, because that would really amplify our impact, being able to really communicate, invest more in communication. And then another risk is the fact that we're a relatively small nonprofit organization, and though we've had like great funding successes lately, it's still, we really have to invest in our staff positions to make sure that the great people that we have here aren't snatched up by another organization, because the team that we have here is one of our greatest assets. And being able to, participate in conferences and travel around and have conversations about what's happening inside our sector and outside of our sector, all of those things are really important. So, that's just an ongoing risk that I'm sure lots of people have in common.